Hello, and welcome to the Old Farm Bus Podcast. This is the back of the bus session.
Hello and welcome to the Old Farm Bus Back of the Bus Sessions podcast. Today I am absolutely buzzing because I've wanted this guest on for so long and now he's here to come and teach the youths of Ripley, but I've got him for a podcast. So welcome aboard, Nathan Arnold.
Hello, my friend.
Don't worry, in that silent bit there, I put in a little bit of a foley of a crowd going absolutely wild. I put balloons in, confetti.
I think I've seen it.
Mate, how are you keeping?
I'm good. How are you?
So good. I'm so happy you're here.
Yeah, so glad
You're
to be
my
back.
energy. You're everything I need.
Glad to be back. I mean, it's been a while. We've said we'd do this podcast for a long time, so no, it's good to be here.
Every time we get on the phone together, we basically do a podcast.
We do.
We just
My
don't
battery
film
runs
it.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But today is the day. So, Nathan, you joined ITL, who I work for, and as one of the motivational speakers and so on.
Yeah.
Ian Gilbert, my man, put us together.
Yeah.
Can you just tell the audience, like, your accolades, how you ended up working for ITL, who you are as a figure? And I'll make sure I put some of the goals up as well in this podcast episode.
Okay. Yeah. How did it come about? Interesting enough, it was my partner Kaylee. She went out to Nepal in 2015 with the earthquake. And taking resources out with Links to Nepal charity. And on one of the trips, she was with Ian Gilbert. A few years ago.
Nepal?
In Nepal.
Wow.
Yeah. So I wasn't on that trip and I didn't know Kaylee at the time. So this was a bit before our relationship started. And then I can remember putting a post out on Facebook, actually, looking for, it's weird because in football you have an agent. So I kind of, when I stopped playing and I started to go, doing a lot of work with mental health, I didn't have anybody out there kind of pushing it for me. And it was hard because I was just, self-generating all my work. And I can remember putting a post out on Facebook and it was actually one of the guys from Links to Nepal was like, oh, Ian Gilbert. I think it was Lisa Ashes actually.
Oh, shout out to Lisa.
Yeah, shout out to Lisa. So I wrote his number down and it just sat in the drawer for about 2 years. And then fast forward, probably about 8 months ago, I came across his number and I thought, I'm going to give him a call.
What, in one of them drawers in the house where it's got
just
pins
hidden away.
and
Yeah, just collecting
bubbles.
dust. Yeah. And you know what? It was such an amazing hour and a half on a Zoom call. It was just incredible. And he then said that he's seen something or seen enough in my story to push it forward to Dave. And then we probably had a bit of a back and forth for a couple of weeks. We had more phone conversations about which direction we could take it. And then he invited me to be an associate for ITL.
Wow. I mean, so that story we're going to get into, if that's okay with you. Sure. Who is it you played for? Tell us your accolades in football and what sort of made you, let's say, famous.
I started out at Mansfield Town. I was there for 11 years. And then I left and kind of took a different direction, really, because at the time there's a Bosman rule. So because Mansfield held my registration, because I'd been there from a young child, when I got to, I think it was 2021, and I was looking to leave, my contract was running out in the summer. They still hold my registration till I'm 24. So there's a Bosman rule where a club has to pay a compensation fee. And so I had to get an agent to try and negotiate through that. And then I ended up going actually to Hyde in Manchester. So I took a step back and it didn't go to plan.
Hyde
United.
Oh,
yeah. So he didn't go
to... you said literally Hyde, you went into hiding.
Oh, yeah. I should have done, yeah. And then I ended up actually... I thought that I was going to progress, and actually, I learned very quickly from a young age. Football is unforgiving, and
ruthless.
If you don't have people represent you the right way, and at the time, my agent was Paul Warhurst. He was at Bolton and Blackburn. Just finished his career, so kind of put all my trust and faith that he had contacts in the game. it turned out that I ended up going to Hyde United, which was a good experience in itself. But it took me on a different direction to where I wanted to be. And so from there, I quickly got out of my deal there and went to Alfreton, which is just down the road from here.
My dad's the most capped player for Alfreton.
Yes.
Apart from a goalkeeper.
Wow. Yeah, I've seen that actually. I did look that up. So I went to Alfreton, some really good times at Alfreton. I was there for 3 seasons, got promoted in my first season from the National League North, it is now. And so some of those players went on to have good careers, and it was just a really good time. And then I got signed by Cambridge United from Alfreton. We actually played them in an FA Trophy game. We went and played them down in Cambridge. It was a crazy game. I think it went to extra time. We won like 6-3, and I scored. So it was a good victory for us because Cambridge was obviously higher opposition. But then I can remember off the back of that game there was some interest, and then in the summer I ended up signing for Cambridge, and then I'd spent a season there, got promoted with Cambridge, and I was in my first year of a 2-year deal, and then I'd spoken to Paul Hurst at Grimsby, and I went on a season-long loan, so I came back up this way where I live with my family, so further up north, and then I went from Grimsby to Lincoln, and that was my last club.
Last club in Lincoln?
Yeah.
And how did that pan out?
Yeah, so it was crazy really, because probably Alfreton I got promoted in my first season, but I was kind of always wanting to test myself higher, and I felt like when I went to Cambridge it felt like a big club. We had a really good team. We did the double that year, so went to Wembley twice.
Wow.
And
You've been to Wembley a lot, mate.
And then after Cambridge I went to Grimsby, and we got to Wembley in the playoff final, but we lost this time to Bristol Rovers on penalties. Interestingly enough, so when I was at Cambridge and before I signed for Grimsby, Bristol Rovers was also an offer on the table. So when I went to Grimsby and Bristol ended up being in the final, and Bristol won on penalties. And so I signed permanently that summer for Grimsby, and then we got promoted to the Football League. So went back to Wembley the 3rd season in a row, and then went to Lincoln City, and we got to the last day of the FA Cup quarterfinals against Arsenal, and won the league.
I've seen you have a shot against Czech, didn't you?
That's right, yeah.
It's
just incredible time, because I think
yeah,
so it was just incredible 3-4 years. I mean, I think it was something like I got promoted three seasons out of 4 with 3 different clubs. So it was just one success after the other, and it was an incredible time. But yeah, that's pretty much my career. I didn't have like loads of clubs. I kind of stayed for at least 2 seasons as a pro. But I think the hardest thing was coming away from professional football, because you're so conditioned to it, and you go and you go in every day. You've got coaches telling you what to do, what to eat,
so like
when to do it.
Institutionalized.
Yeah, in a way. Yeah, you just get you're so normalized to that kind of environment, that life. And
I had a Marine on the podcast, and it was really funny because you imagine their struggles.
Yeah.
It is PTSD, and people imagine it to be like the worst trauma here. But he said, I had a really bad struggle. It was the worst time afterwards from being institutionalized. But it was actually the micro things. It was booking a dentist and going out shopping.
Yeah.
All that was done for me. So I just couldn't function after getting out of there, because everything was already set up and in this routine.
Yeah.
That was his hardship. He'd seen terrible things and been involved in them, but he just couldn't understand how people operate without being told what to do, how to do it, when to do it.
That's it. I think, you always find coping strategies. When it comes to trauma, emotions or anything like this, sometimes the hardest thing is when you're so used to doing a certain thing, and then having to, you're redirected, whether that's an injury or whether that's in your control, out of your control, whatever that is. The hardest thing for me was certainly transitioning from full-time. And I signed for a few clubs at part-time, but it just wasn't the same. You had to go and look for work, your income. It's something that you would probably have to think about for the first time. And trying to keep on top of your fitness, I think that's the main thing, because you can't take it for granted how good of a condition you are in.
Yeah.
And you don't feel like you're working hard. It's
Sort
weird.
of kind of an unrealistic condition, really, in terms of when you're in quote unquote real life.
Yeah.
You've got kids as well, haven't you now?
Yeah.
But to be a dad, to live that job, to be a part of it, to fit the gym in and have a routine in that element, isn't always easy to keep on top of. And when your focus of football is you're training at this point, your fitness is here, you're eating this, it's all out for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can imagine
and the thing is as well, it's like you're earning good money and the gym's free.
Yeah.
You know, and then you're earning less money and then you have to pay for the gym. So, you know, I always say football's a privilege, and whilst you are able, and sport in general, you know, if you're fit enough, well enough to play it, it's hard work, of course. You know, you have to put the hours in and the dedication and the commitment, but it's so noticeable when you come out of that environment and you step away from it to actually realise, gosh, you know, how well you had it.
I'm going to ask you some football, more trivial questions in that side, and then we're going to get to the meat over here, if that's all right.
Sure.
Quick fire. Favourite moment playing football?
Favourite moment? Probably scoring the goal at Wembley.
Was that for Grimsby?
For Grimsby.
Putting them up, basically?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What league were they in?
We was in the National League then, so one out of the Football League. And I think when I signed for Grimsby, there was just this massive weight of expectation. You felt it as a player. I mean, it's a small place. I've got some incredible friends in Grimsby. I love going back. It's like my second home. Yeah. But I just remember the weight and the responsibility for a National League club. It just felt like a proper football club, that it belonged in the Football League. And not only that, when I arrived, I think they spent 5 seasons in the conference. So it was, and then there was falling out with the owner, and there's some unrest there. And the fans, you know, a draw at home would feel like a loss. You know, there's times when we get booed off at half time.
Serious desperation for this.
Yeah, and the thing is, you know, as players, we're only human, so we do feel that pressure. But it was probably that season. A lot went and happened in that 18 months, 2 years when I was there as well off the pitch. So it was just pure emotion and elation and relief, really, when I'd scored that goal.
Well, because I know I don't know how many views it's got on YouTube, but I've probably half of them. I show it to everyone.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Like, my mate, he scored this goal. I love it. It does, because you're absolutely more than elated. You're fully in, I don't know what you'd call that moment, but can you try and articulate what that felt like, scoring that goal in front of all them fans with that pressure that had built up?
Yeah.
It gives me this energy and this buzz of, oh my God, imagine feeling that on that stage. Yeah. Can you sort of articulate it?
Well, I think when you look at high performance in anything, you know, you have to deliver. And not only that, you have to try and find a level of consistency and a level of performance that is going to ultimately bring success. You know, that was the outcome. And I think that the fact that we lived it the year before at Wembley, and we got all the way through extra time to penalties, and we lose on penalties, and the feeling of, you know, losing out a one kick at a penalty shootout, you know, a full season. Imagine all the hard work that you've put in, and then and credit to Bristol Rovers, they got over the line. But I just felt that the kind of frustration, the pain from that kind of bled into a new season, the following season, and it kind of inspired us really and motivated us to then go one better. But then also losing my mum that year in 2015. So I suppose that the feeling scoring that goal was one of joy, because you know you walk down the street in Grimsby. At the time I was doing some barbering as well, so I was engulfed in those relationships, you know, in Grimsby in the community. And when you start to see, you know, you're in London, you're playing at the National Stadium, but then you're seeing familiar faces behind the goal, the cooks, the cleaners at the football club, and, you know, just seeing them with their families, how much it means to them. So one is joy, and secondly is relief, because there is a weight of responsibility. You know, if when you start to realise inside football that when you've got the cooks and the cleaners and they're on minimum wage, And you get promotion, and it's just that small as their money's going to go up.
Wow.
£3-4. It's
gravitas.
It might not be anything much to us financially, but to these people that are grafting every single day behind the scenes, don't get any credit. Just working hard in private. I think it's that, as well as it's pure elation for everybody connected to the football club. And obviously the 5 years they've been where they've missed out on promotion, they're really wanting to get back. So joy, elation, relief, it's quite hard to describe. I've said this on a few more podcasts that I've done, but I was actually quite tired going into the game because I did mental rehearsal all week. It's so weird. It's like,
what's mental rehearsal?
So just playing the game over in my head all week.
Is that like visualization?
Yeah.
Winning in essence. Or
so
just
just can't sleep. Playing at Wembley.
I get you. Wow.
Playing at Wembley. What you're gonna do. How you're gonna perform. And kind of then going over it, mental rehearsal and visualizing. Scoring and just trying to put yourself in a positive state going into it. It's amazing really how powerful your mind is and how it has an effect on the physiology. So when I stepped out into the arena going into the warm-up, I was thinking, gosh, I feel a bit mentally fatigued, going into it, because you've created so many different scenarios in your head. So probably wasn't a good idea.
Mate, and the other last one is the team that you sort of fit into and felt most family orientated, or just really felt a great energy towards. Which team would that be? And are you allowed to answer this? Will you break some hearts here? Thought you were my mate.
It's really difficult, because I'd probably say out of all the clubs, just Hyde, first part, front end of my career really, where I didn't choose that club. I fell into it because of there was a lack of options, I suppose. And that's not to disrespect Hyde United. They're a good football club. But it was just a case of, at that moment in time, I didn't really have any connection to the football club. And Mansfield, Cambridge, Grimsby and Lincoln, obviously there was a little bit more. Cambridge was different because Cambridge kind of went on merit off the back of a good season. But Grimsby, like a second home. Lincoln after the back of Grimsby, which is really strange, because to go from Grimsby to Lincoln and there's got this rivalry going on, it wasn't well received probably when I first went from Grimsby to Lincoln. But I suppose it's a strange one, because you're detached from the rivalry, but you respect it.
Yeah.
And because you respect the people as well that you've got relationships with.
You understand what that means to a team.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, but very much similar in terms of my experiences, and the fact that I could be in a chapter of the club's history where they both achieved success and playing a pivotal part in that, and a huge contribution, probably diluted the rivalry and the move to go from one club to the other.
And where do you think you had most success at? Where did you score most of your goals, and what season was best for you at a club?
It's difficult, because when you have achieved success, it's all amazing. So it's very hard to, like say, in a probably a period of 3 years, Cambridge, Lincoln and Grimsby, got promoted back to back. So
good commonality, yeah.
It's hard to decide, but I think Lincoln City, in terms of, if you look on paper, we lost to Arsenal at the Emirates in front of 60,000. That's probably the peak of my experience as a professional footballer. So that in itself, the achievement to get to the quarterfinals of the FA Cup, I think was the first non-league team in over 100 years to achieve that. So I think the level of achievement must be at Lincoln, but I think with it being my favourite goal and losing my mum at Grimsby as well, and it was more than just on the pitch, my experience and my time at Grimsby, it was everything that came with it.
There was a story blossom there.
There's a story there, and so it's very difficult. I mean, I went back to Grimsby with Lincoln City the following season, and I think it was the photographer came up to me and she was like, something you've just done there I've not seen and
Giving me goosebumps.
It was the fact I got subbed off. It wasn't my best game, and I suppose there was kind of I don't know, it was just a strange feeling because of the love that I have for Grimsby, but I'm also now my services with Lincoln City and falling in love with that club, and it's such a strange experience. But she said to me that you've been clapped off by all four corners of the stadium, and in a local derby that don't happen. In a local derby there's emotions, there's rivalry, there's history, tension,
friction.
So for me to come off and get applauded by four corners, that was really special.
Wow. What a moment, mate. That sounds like one of my favourite moments for you. Yeah. Because that's what football can be and is. It is a togetherness, really.
Absolutely.
People get so lost in this divide, my team, your team.
Yeah.
But when, Ericsson or something, when that happens, actually what people do is come together. And it's the same with dividing life a lot of the time. When we see a big natural disaster, something terrible happens, everyone goes, oh, actually, are you all right? I'm sorry I called you that the other day because I need to protect you now.
Absolutely.
And people get so lost in it, but I love that you actually had that story develop through them clubs, and they all just give respect to that. I'm glad we got the football questions in because I wanted those. I've been meaning to ask you, and now we've got it on a podcast form. We'll probably get into them. What I usually do with guests, Nathan, is go backwards, but actually you said something, so I'm going to go forwards because I think it is interesting in being institutionalized. And what we started with was you ended up working for the company I work for, Independent Thinking, and that's mindset stuff, and you go and do talks and inspire. What made you take that leap then? What made you think outside of football? Did you have to conjure up that thought for yourself of, oh, this is my next step? Or did you have people help discover that for you?
It's really strange how quickly it all developed, really. It wasn't designed that way. But when I transitioned, I made a conscious decision at 30. And, my family's been really supportive. My nan used to put the radio on every game and sat listening in her armchair. She's been so dedicated to my football. And for me, I didn't take the decision lightly because it's for my nan. What's my nan going to do now on a Tuesday night in midweek or on a Saturday afternoon? She's been with me since I was a child going to games. And when I say it wasn't designed, I played 52 games, I think it was, at Lincoln City. We'd been promoted. Was one game away. We got to semi-finals of the trophy. So it was one game away from Wembley. We'd won the league and then we'd got to the last day of the FA Cup. So physically, mentally, I was drained. Of course, it was an unbelievable season for us. But I think prior to Lincoln, when I lost my mother at Grimsby, I didn't grieve. And I think that football has been amazing in terms of offering me that kind of escape and that filter. So when I go to football, I've always expressed myself through a football, even at a young age.
Really?
It's kept me out of trouble. So football was always where I felt safe. It was familiar and where I could express myself.
Get lost in flow.
Yeah, and football as well. I mean, once you go to football and you step over that white line, all your worldly responsibilities, all your problems leave you for a 90-minute game. And so I suppose once I kind of process what we've just achieved, not only at Lincoln, but the last 3 years, Wembley 4 times, and scoring at Wembley and just, playing against Alexis Sanchez and Ozil and all these people, it's like I kind of exhaled, I come up for air, and then I realised that, damn, I hadn't even grieved, I haven't even attended this massive hole in my life. And so... Did
that sort of come crashing in that moment when you came up for air? Did you get hit hard?
It was mainly, I'll tell you what brought it to my attention was that I started to feel unwell, and it was more so my breathing, and I had medicals and football, and I had doctors checking me over, and they just couldn't pinpoint what it was, and I just didn't feel right. I had heart palpitations and other things happening physiologically.
So it was more physiological.
Yeah. And so I eventually realised that it was chronic anxiety, and the anxiety stemmed from me being on high alert, and I suppose it was the trauma probably from my mother's death. And I think also when you are repressing those emotions, and not only those emotions but from a very young age, of some of the traumas and some of the things that I went through and grown through, it caught up with me. And I suppose then what it allowed me to do is actually, I always used to say, kind of pull the curtain back. I was almost like a different person. I used to say I'm a public success but private failure. It was like we could go out on the street, someone would come up to us, have a selfie, and it'd be, kind of in football, you get put on a pedestal, especially when you're winning and you're successful at a club, you kind of get put on a pedestal. And then I go home and I'm a completely different person dealing with my own issues. And I can remember getting invited on BBC Radio Lincolnshire after the season had finished. And when I say coming up for air, it was very much exhaling, kind of processing what I've just achieved, but then actually opening up for the first time of how I'm truly feeling. And obviously all the stigma that goes around with mental health, especially back then, it was kind of like, I felt vulnerable actually speaking about those things. But I just thought, well,
I'm just going to... in a way as well?
Yeah,
being a footballer, being a man.
Yeah, absolutely. There's all that
elements behind it.
Yeah, I think it's, you imagine as well how macho and masculine a place.
I've been on a Sunday League team, mate, so
yeah.
I've got an idea.
Yeah, I mean, you're injured in football, you take some diclofenics, you take some painkillers, you get through a game.
Yeah.
There's no, it's relentless, it's unforgiving. So, and I suppose it's like that mentally as well. It's kind, you build a callus, you build such a mental resilience in football. You have to. Social media, getting hammered after a game if you don't play well, if you don't score, if you lose. You kind of find yourself, you built this such a strong mindset, but then it has a detriment to the way you feel sometimes, because you're not actually being truthful to how you feel, or you can't let on how you're feeling as well. So the anxiety came from probably repressing all those emotions over the years. I did have signs where I was, I had panic attacks when I was a teenager, and it kind of got brushed under the carpet, and then all that surfaced, and I did an inventory on, all of it. But it was kind of, to answer your question, because it wasn't designed that way. I went on the BBC Radio Lincolnshire, and off the back of that, within 4 days, I got 60 people in a room, just literally just chatting to the host like we are now. And my phone after the show, breakfast show, went off, and I just got notification after notification. It was like, listen to your breakfast show. I can't believe you was going through that all season. This wasn't just towards the end of the season. There was times when I'd ring my manager, Danny Cowley, and I'd be like, I don't feel right. And he was really good. Like, I could go into the office and speak about things to him and his brother, Nicky. So they was a real good support. But I don't feel like I actually fully, truly was honest throughout that season. So there were signs throughout the season. And then, my notifications went off. And then I just thought, what do I do with these people? Like, all these people are struggling with their mental health too. What do I do with them? So spoke to some of the people at the football club, can I have a function room? And I just threw on a workshop, and at the time I was kind of self-educating myself as well. Yeah. So I went on a journey of I was just putting my head in every book I could in terms of personal development, and I can remember speaking to football club and arranging this. Can we put this together this week? I want to really, put on a workshop for these people. And so literally just gathered these people in, and it was so raw looking back. It was just probably the worst workshop I've ever ran. But
Here's some ideas I've got, guys. What do you think?
So it was terrible. I mean, even just introducing them even to housekeeping, where the toilets are, everything. It was just like, literally, come in, sit down. This is my story. But it was
anxiety. So how did that feel, filling a room out with
absolutely, yeah,
60
heightened it. But the purpose behind it outweighed.
Did you feel it was bigger than yourself in that moment?
Absolutely, yeah. Because I felt like I'm quite a deep person anyway, but I'm an overthinker.
think this is why we get on so much, mate.
But I always think there's a meaning behind everything. And I looked at it and I thought, I've just achieved promotion back to back 3 years in a row, for 4 years. Like, I know that football is going to come to an end at some point, but I'm probably not going to get this opportunity again to be in this privileged position I find myself in at this point, red hot, like, you know,
sort out.
Yeah, where I can actually then go and have a platform to speak about such important matters. And not only that, I spent 17 days with my mother in hospital. So when I lost my mother, there were signs throughout her life, and we'll probably go back a little bit further, which I'll talk about, but kind of towards the end of her life, there was noticeable differences in terms of her health deteriorating and everything, but I didn't know it was surrounded by mental health. And we kind of thought it was a medical thing, but we couldn't put a finger on it. And so I'd spent 17 days in hospital. I was by her bedside, and I can remember afterwards, I was calmer than I should have been. I took it better than I should have done, or thought I should have done, which was kind of a worrying thing, because I thought, when is it going to hit me? But then also I had this kind of inner peace and this knowing that I need to go, and my mother would want me to go and help others in her situation. So I, like I said, got my head in books. I've researched mental health, everything. And I kind of felt it was a duty going forward. So even though, you know, to my nan and other people around me was like, oh, she's making this decision to walk away from full-time football, I actually felt that I had a duty and a responsibility to follow my heart.
Yeah.
Because it was, I couldn't logically understand why I'd reached that decision. Football saved my life. Football's always been a vehicle to get me to where I was. But then I just felt, after losing my mum, and I think there's two things. I think bereavement can do that, and I think also hitting rock bottom in life. Because you either you change for one or two things, is either inspiration or desperation. And I love that. I wasn't desperate. I was inspired to, and I thought to myself, if there's one person out there, because I thought, if I now have the knowledge I do, maybe I could have helped my mother in that situation, and we could have avoided that situation. So I thought, well, now I've got the knowledge and the intellect and the life experiences, if I can then intervene and help somebody else. So I thought there was a bigger purpose to it. And so I always say, strangely, I didn't even make a decision in the end. It kind of was just, I need to do this.
Came to me.
And that was it. And it didn't make sense to everybody around me. And when I look back in hindsight, it was kind of like, okay, yeah, maybe I was redirected. I felt I was redirected. And I probably wasn't prepared for it, you know, financially, mentally, to come away from full-time football, the conditioning and everything that goes with being a footballer. But at the same time, I've met some incredible people and done some incredible work with people that has been life-changing for them. And when I look back at that period, it's like, I wouldn't change that for the amount of money or what, because in that period of my life, I was called to do that in a way that I needed to go and reach out to other people. And like I said, it wasn't designed, but I just felt, I felt that I just needed to do it.
Yeah, and I suppose within that confusion that you were feeling, but this knowing as well, this pull, it is an element of, I need to get this, I need to understand it. And in order for me to do that, I can then help them people. Yeah. And I've felt a similar way before, where I've had that rock bottom, and I can't explain what it is, where it is either I'll go this way or that way. Yeah. But there was this pull to, I'm going to do something with it, and I'm going to help people, inspire them through it. But it was also in this feeling of, I need to get it. I need to know why my mind's
reaching that decision.
Reaching. So I think, do you have any advice for people that have got to that point in life, got to rock bottom, and they could go one of two ways? What is that burn and that pull, and how do they find that?
I think you have to get to know yourself. I think that's a big one. I think I used to do it where I'd know other people more than I know myself.
Yeah.
I'd be, I want what he's got, or I want what she's got, or
Yeah.
and I was kind of living in the future, and I wasn't being grateful for what I had. I wasn't appreciative. I was a victim in a way. When I look back, I used to tell my story, and especially growing through childhood and not having my father around and stuff like that, I was victim for a long time. And it wasn't until actually I started sitting down with myself and asking meaningful questions. You think everything's surface level, you're a footballer, very much very little conversations going on around how you're feeling. It's "Hi mate, you're right," and then not asking again, "Are you okay though?"
Yeah.
And that's when you can
How you
start to
actually
get into
feeling.
how you actually feel, because everyone will say, "How are you? You okay?" "Oh yeah, yeah." It's just a natural reaction to say, "Yeah,
It's
I'm
like
fine."
a social dance, isn't it, that we've
Yeah.
constructed?
Yeah. So it was those kind of conversations with myself, and also it was, I need to heal effectively. I was finding unhealed parts of myself that needed attending to, that I didn't have time to attend to, that I brushed under the carpet, that I wouldn't look at because it's too painful, and that football was always a release and a get out clause for me to try and be like, well, actually, I'm doing well here. I'm successful in this part of my life. Maybe I can just ride the wave, and maybe over time, all that will just be forgotten about.
Yeah, I've got this nice blanket at the minute. This can stay with me for a while.
Yeah.
We'll deal with it another time, but potentially it could just fade.
Yeah. And what I will say to people is that it's not kind of got to the destination realizing that's not the answer. It's kind of like we all got our own path and journey in life, but actually it's a really conflicting one, because football, if it wasn't for football, I don't know what I'd be doing, and I don't know where I would have ended up. So it's been like I said, a vehicle to get me to that point, and then a massive conflict to say, actually though, I'm avoiding the real hard conversations, and I've lost myself in all of that as well. So it's like trying to find yourself amongst the success and amongst that career. But when I say about, getting to know yourself, I think that's really important, because then that will help you make those decisions and reach those decisions, because you'll have direction, you'll have purpose. And I think knowing why you want to do it's most important. I think the how will show up. It's the why, it's the what is the bigger purpose for this. I mean, yeah, I think for me it was kind of, and you've mentioned it about this pull, it's almost like I looked at that and I thought, well, I'm at the height of football in terms of what I've maximized for myself with my skill set, my attributes, my ability, my capabilities. That season I seen it as like, I'm 30, coming on to 30, and realistically, if I don't strike while the iron's hot, I might miss 10,000 people. It was that kind of conversation. It was like, and it wasn't even about me. It was about, I mean, I'd get DMs on Instagram out the blue, and somebody'd be sat in their bedroom feeling suicidal. Now, if I was just to not even accept that request, or if I was to just ignore that, I had this like voice in my head that it was almost like my mother was with me in a way, like as to say, like, well, there's a bigger purpose now. And I always think there's lessons as well. I'd read a book called The Conversations with God. It's not a religious book.
It's funny because I was going to get on to tell me the book that like sort of give this to you. And is this the book, or is there a few on the way?
So Neil Donald Walsh, who wrote this book, it's basically a journal. He used to get up at 2-3 a.m. in the morning and write, and he
Declutter.
And it ended up being a bestseller. But he was talking about there's a hidden treasure in every experience, and so I thought, well, what's the hidden treasure here? Surely we all, this is life. We're all going to lose people we love dearly. But what's the treasure in it? And I kind of used that platform as a footballer and thought, right, okay, how can I turn my pain into something positive? And it might sound a little bit selfish, but I was healing myself.
Yeah,
in the
that's
process.
what I was alluding to earlier. It's that confusion, I'm going to heal myself through it, but in doing so, I'm going to help so many people too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, the first workshop that I put on, it's so raw, it's authentic, but it was so raw. And I mean, I'm not an expert in that field, or at the time, had no experience in workshops or anything. But I kind of think that through healing yourself and finding out what works for yourself to get through that.
You've got to trial it, haven't you?
I think success leaves clues. So the success that I was having by healing myself.
I love that you said this bit, because that's what I was feeling earlier. I was like, there's this... I can't explain it.
Yeah,
but
there's evidence there.
Yeah.
And once there's evidence there, you kind of want to invite other people. Oh, look what I've discovered. A lot of people, we're more alike as people than we are different. So we'll all have adversity, setbacks, challenges. That's the harsh reality. We will all have those times that we need to deal with. But and we can speak about relatable issues that we've had, but how do you navigate your way through those? That's the challenge. And obviously there's a lot of people out there who are expertise in particular fields, but I thought, well, this is what's worked for me. I'm not an expert, but the feedback that I'd give someone in that situation in a crisis is I do this. They try it, oh, thank you, it worked. So then you start to build the confidence that actually, oh, it's not just working on me, then it's actually working on other people. And then you build a case for it that actually it's effective in what you're doing. You build more research, a bit more reading, and then you start to take your qualifications in certain, I was fascinated with psychology, NLP. So kind of then I felt through the healing process is that continuous improvement and the need to want to learn. And I suppose it wasn't even, it literally blew up to the point where I need to grasp this now, and I need to research, I need to learn, because I've got so many people that are reaching out for my help. And I suppose it gets to a point where, you can't lose yourself in that either.
Yeah.
Because you can be selfless and help so many people, but at the same time, you've got to have your own purpose, your own mission, and your own direction.
Made, what a lovely balance there. That's where I think I was imbalanced at the start, because... Same. And I probably felt maybe I was trying through validation to look like a saviour and this Jesus complex. But I was going forward being like, I'm doing this for them, for them, for them, for them. And then I realised, oh no, I've gone on this path because I was hurting. There was so much weight on me. And I needed to find the answers, and it helps. It gives more help and gravitas if you're going, I'm doing it for them. It takes it away from you a bit, but eventually you need to realise you're all part of it. You need it just as much as them. And that's where you start going into the nitty gritty of courses and honing in and really finding how to teach it. Because at the start you're just doing it through,
you're winging it effectively.
Learning on the spot, implementing things. Works for a bit, didn't work here, but when you realise, oh, it's me and them and we need to do together, that's where you can sort of understand the teaching approach towards it. And
I think bringing it back to, my time when I was 29, 30 and I came away, I had another year left on my contract at Lincoln City. So for me to not want any money, I've got a 52 grand contract sat there, and I could have just gone training with the youth team for a year. I'd have just, made a bit of a kick and a fuss and just picked up my money. I wanted to leave with integrity. I wanted to do it the right way. And also Lincoln City, same with all the clubs, have been fantastic with me. So I actually sat down with the chief exec and said, look, even though I've got a contract here worth 52 grand, I actually don't want a penny. I just want to mutually agree that we come away. And, and they respected my decision at the time. They questioned it at first, but then they respected it. And but it's very hard for a teammate in that situation to be like, oh, Nath, actually, what are you doing? This has been your life for your whole life. Why would you make a decision to just walk away from it all of a sudden? But what I would say is that it was okay. I kind of like, I kind of looked at it and thought, well, it's okay not to be understood.
Yeah.
Like, I think we walk around wanting to be understood, and that's where the frustration comes from, because you want to be understood by people.
Hear me out.
And I was okay with not being understood, and it was kind of
you
like,
knew yourself by then a little bit more.
Yeah, I think so. I think I was
I know where this decision's coming from.
Yeah, I was comfortable in my decision, but then also as well, though, you have to respect your peers and actually come up with an answer, and it's hard to, because they can't see what you can see, or they've not lived your journey and your path, so it's really hard logically to kind of translate that to people. And then it's a lonely path, because it's like, I mean, I've had days afterwards where it's like, I started writing a book during this time, try and make sense of it all as well. So I was doing a lot of journaling, but for the season that I came away from Lincoln City, I lived in a flat behind the stadium. So on a Tuesday night, they actually used my communal car park to park and walk to the stadium. And I went incognito for a full season. Literally, had my head down. It was one of them where it was like, I could hear the cheering. I could hear the 617 siren that used to go on. I could hear everything. And there'd be moments when I'm sat there and I'm like looking for my shin pads and my boot, and I forget myself, thinking like, Nath, what are you doing? At this time I'm not earning any money. I'm still figuring it out what I'm going to do, transitioning from football. And it's like the easiest thing to go back and do what you love and what you know. But then I had to carry that duty out and trust the process that actually it's all going to make sense. I think that was a challenging thing, because when I say walk away from football as well, it doesn't mean that mentally I wasn't mentally stable or in the right place. It was more of a different purpose, but it was interesting, because these supporters used to have red and white scarves on, and my bedroom window was literally, I was like 10 yards away from these people, and I'm like, they don't even know I live here. Like, this is my flat. And it was just, I was watching the season and watching the football, and I was so close to it still, but I felt so far away from it as well. A very lonely path. I think when when you transitioning from doing something that that's all you've ever known, and you can only trust the process though when you get to know yourself and you have a healthy relationship with yourself, and you are on a journey of healing as well, because otherwise, I just think lack of direction and lack of purpose is a big issue really for people.
And with football, your purpose is so big, in terms of that all these fans want to win the game.
Yeah.
All the players around you, the manager, everybody wants a win out of this. So do you feel, being a bit of a saviour and helping people in a way, and so many people, it needed to be something big that you were going into then? To
try and outweigh making sense of making that decision.
Week in, week out, you've got so much on your plate to try and give back to. Then do you feel that was another weighing up over here of, I need to give back in a big way over here now?
I think it probably took me 8 months to a year really to actually, when I say come up for air and exhale, I probably first time in my life give myself permission to listen to me. And as much as that sounds selfish, it allowed me to be selfless down the line to so many people.
Well, it feels like, anyway, that's something in your nature. And you said in this podcast, did you not have a father figure really in your life growing up?
No, I didn't meet my father till I was 20.
I'm just interested in that, because that was such an altruistic thing of the 52 grand here, and you just wanted to help and do stuff for people. Where's that level of maturity come from? Have you had a mentor in your past that has taught you to be a respectful, kind, honest human? And if you can give.
I think I've always had good values instilled in me, from my mother and my nan. But I feel like I said earlier about bereavement, losing somebody or hitting rock bottom. And I think when I went through the process, 17 days feels like a year in that moment when you're watching a loved one deteriorate.
Yeah.
So 17 days, it was like, what a humbling experience. And for me to actually, I mean, what's some trophies, what's champagne spraying, what's playing at Wembley and scoring a goal in that moment. It's nothing compared to bringing a fresh perspective to actually life can be short.
Wow. So
the message that I took from that, when I said there's a hidden treasure in every experience, was that when I'd left the hospital for the final evening, I can remember thinking to myself, I need to live my life and take deliberate action and live intently. So before, I was kind of, don't get me wrong, loved every second of my football career, but it was like, okay, so what's my intentions? And taking deliberate action, actually being conscious of my decisions. And I've obviously got to a level of competency within football and all the hours and hours of training and dedication and commitment and everything like that. And then you kind of on this wave then. But it was like, okay, taking the lesson and the message from that was, I need to, so when you talk about kind of you finding something to outweigh the football, it was kind of like I'd seen, if I channel this in the right way, all the pain and the loss, but I always said it humbled me. If I can take that and I can recycle all that pain into something more positive, rather than I could have come out of that experience and thought, me and my sister had a completely different experience from bereavement, and there's no right and wrong way to grieve. Everyone deals with it differently. It hits people differently, but I wanted to hone on that and channel that and think, right, how can I be a source of inspiration for other people going through it, to say, actually, you haven't got to be a victim to it. You can come out a victor and actually change your mindset. And I suppose football, in a way, always helped going through that time, because I'd already built the mindset of what it would take as a high performance individual. So it was like I'm not saying I was prepared, because I don't think you can ever be prepared for something like that, but I definitely think that there was certain kind of characteristics that I needed. And the resilience comes from childhood as well.
Because that's a good point there. You've got your sister and yourself that took two different paths from it.
Yeah.
Do you just feel it was more innate in you to pick the path you went down, as well as the football path you'd lived? You've built characteristics there.
I think so. And then there's an element of, as humans, we're pain avoiders naturally. So when we're going through that time, I volunteered to stay by my mother's bedside, and that's how painful it was to see her go through what she went through. Yeah. My sister couldn't watch and couldn't see, and she would rather, it's not happening, it's not real. And I think because I went through that, and there's almost a line and a threshold, because when you go over that and past that, I think there's a certain level of acceptance in that as well. Where I think that's probably one of the hardest things is when you lose a loved one, you don't quite accept it at first. Yeah. But I went through the acceptance stage because I had nowhere to hide. I wasn't hiding.
I faced pain.
Yeah. I turned to it, and it became my reality, and I had to get my head around it.
Do you feel that's where the real truth lies, when you turn towards pain?
I think that's the only way you can find complete peace, inner peace.
You have to face it.
I think so. I think you have to go through it. It does. It is painful. And like I say, as humans, we are pain avoiders. But I do think the combined with the football and the mental toughness and not only that, born into humble beginnings as well. So there was resilience built from a very young age, from some of the things that I'd seen and witnessed and gone through and experienced.
Can I ask what the deterioration was with you?
So in the end, my mother, it was poor mental health, and it was just got to a stage. There was no on a coroner's report. There was no medical issues or anything like that. It was just alcoholism as a result of poor mental health. Yeah. And this wasn't kind of at the weekend, getting drunk, and then in the week fine. This was like in doses throughout the week for a sustained period of time, which eventually caught with her. But
there's that saying, isn't there? It's drugs and alcohol aren't the problem; they're the solution to the problem.
yes. Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose when I talk about anxiety and kind of being on high alert, I mean, one of my earliest memories, my mother was drinking when I was playing organised sport, 10 years old. So for me, I've kind of grew up around it. And I suppose because it became the norm, I didn't see the signs or know about the signs. Actually, it's down to poor mental health. It was her way of dealing with it and coping, and I've very rarely seen her drunk. But I suppose that is one sign, they say, of alcoholic as well, that they don't really get drunk. It's kind of a sustained state, if you like. So it was something that kind of I got to like, a certain age, and I was like, oh, actually, there may be a problem here. And then when you start seeing the weight coming off and you start to see the, a physical appearance changing, that's when you kind of know that you need to do something about it. And you don't know what to do because I suppose it's very complex, and it's not my area of expertise, but with alcohol and people that are dependent on alcohol, what I know is that it can be worse if you if you remove the alcohol from them as well. So it's kind of, in a way, it was it was another sign of suffering over a sustained period of time, which I kind of was more angry for the intake of alcohol rather than the compassion of why are you taking the alcohol. So I grew up with a lot of frustrations rather than compassion. So and then that flipped.
That changed in time, did it?
Absolutely, yeah.
How did you find that forgiveness?
Like sadness, really. Looking at my mother's sadness, and to think our person can get to the point where they effectively have waved the white flag at life, to get to that point. And it must feel like, because my mother was an intelligent lady, but it must felt like almost shouting through a glass, and people on the other side just can't see or hear. And it was and as much as, oh, Mum, let's go to the doctors, let's go and get help. And these are a crisis like that, crisis intervention. It takes more than the family members to just point something out, and it's not as easy as just, oh, okay, accept it, we'll go down to the doctor. It was denial in there, depression. So it's and when you haven't got no knowledge or have any experience of dealing with that, there's no evidence there before, it's very hard to know what to do other than, you trust in that everything's going to be okay. But it kind of happened, even though it was a long sustained period of time, when the doctor arrived, and that 17-day period, it all happened really quickly.
I mean, it hits differently, doesn't it? Things coming from family, and especially when it's your children saying it.
Yeah,
there is this bit of a feeling of, hang on a minute, I give birth to you, you can't fix this.
Yeah,
I created
absolutely.
you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I can understand why it wouldn't suffice coming through a family's mouth.
Yeah,
it needs so much more behind that.
Yeah, and also I think my mum was a very proud lady, so she wouldn't want to let on that there was anything deeper going on as well. I mean, I used to get to the point where I'd come in, when I was 14, 15, and I'd see a cider bottle on the side and I'd tip it down the sink and things like that. So it was like I was very angry as a teenager, because I didn't want my mother to, I wanted to make better life choices. But then it was kind of navigating my way through adolescent stage and teenage, adolescence, early adult life, knowing that from what I've seen and what I've been around and what I've experienced, to then like pure compassion and pure love and trying to understand everything. Because the thing
truly
is,
sets you free.
yeah, because the thing is, it's you know, it's meeting my needs. You know, what are my needs? Well, I don't want you to drink, and also there was a bit of embarrassment there. You know, if my friends come around the house, or if I was to go to football on occasions, you know, my mum and nan was big smokers as well, so sometimes the smoke would be on my kit or my bag, and so there'd be a lot of embarrassment and a lot of anger and a lot of frustration there. But going into this line of work that I have for the last 5 years, you start to actually understand what is the root cause. Let's connect the dots going backwards. And you know, when you start to understand your parents' behaviour, and there's a lot of your behaviours in your parents as well. Yeah. When you start to actually understand where they come from, that's where the healing begins. You've got to go back cycle, and understand.
It's generational trauma type thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you attribute this to a societal flaw then, in terms of your mum being proud and not wanting to come out and speak about the mental health that she had in her life? Do you feel as a society and a community, if we spoke of this more, if we had more information, if it was educated in all these ways, we wouldn't have this in such an alarming rate?
I think so. It is cultural. It's definitely cultural conditioning. I think if you look at especially the older generation, suck it up, kind of language that they use, and kind of what's been kind of hand me down from parents of our generation, and you look at it, and I think sometimes it's kind of, I always think to myself now, I won't prod and poke people. They can live their life how they want to. Who am I to say someone needs to change their life, even if I see their behaviours to be undesirable or whatever? But for me, it's kind of like it's kind of holding the space for them to lean forward, and if at any point in time they want to obviously talk about it. And like you said, it's difficult when it's a family member, because there is that, you know, you can't see me in my worst state. It's all the front and it's all hidden. Alcohol is really complex. You know, people who are addicted to alcohol, it can be really complex, and it's something that I've lived with. You know, me and my sister growing up, and it's something that I've needed to understand more. But underneath everything, I mean, it's an external behaviour. You know, drugs, alcohol, even to the point of biting your nails, to that level of detail that I've gone and done the work, that understand that there's so many different things that we do habitually that are actually an underlying mental health issue, to some degree. So it's kind of, I would like to think that I'm in a better position as a result of my childhood and everything that I've been through and grown through, because if I hadn't, then I wouldn't have, I suppose, done as much work as I have in this field.
Have you done a lot of work then on your child trauma and sort of your generational, what you've been bred to and conditioned with?
I think I've applied a lot of practical tools, but I think it's an ongoing process. Yeah. I think that life reveals a different version of you at different stages of your life. So it's like, some things that I used to love I now hate, and some things I used to hate I now love.
How so? What?
Well, it's just olives.
Yeah.
I used to hate olives, and I like olives. But
I get you.
But it's just a case of like, you know, we are forever changing. Like, that's the only thing that's permanent is change. So it's kind of like, you know, we do go through stages and phases of our life, and for me, it's just about. I think one thing that we don't do enough culturally is show ourselves more compassion. We're all figuring it out, and you know, and Les Brown, the famous motivational speaker, says we're either in a problem, just left a problem, or heading towards one. And if you think about it, it's so true. I mean, it doesn't mean that you kind of are living on the back foot, anticipating negative things to happen. It just means that if you're on your tiptoes and you are proactive. And I kind of always speak about reacting versus responding. There's two different things there.
Yeah.
So reacting is based off like what you are conditioned to. It's just a normal reaction, emotional reaction. Responding, there's a pause with that, and there's actually a better decision in that you can make, a better choice.
Yeah.
So reacting is something that we always do. Being proactive is being in that response.
I've got probably a good example of that, but when I went travelling,
Yeah.
everyone used to take the mick out of me for the way that I'd open my cereal up. And that was how I'd always done it.
Yeah.
Was like this, and it's like, why'd you do that? What is the point of that?
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'd just always done it. I really had no idea.
Yeah.
And one day I got home, I was sat in the table talking to my mum and dad about my travels, going to see my dad get some cereal.
Yeah.
And he did it the same way. And I was like, oh my God,
So you picked that
I've
up.
picked it up from him.
Yeah.
As simple as that.
Yeah, yeah.
But then that's the thing, you can react through your life going, this is how I open cereal, it's just how I do it. Or you could go, is there a better way? Is there a way to stop it going stale and doing all those things?
Yeah.
But that's the conscious awareness towards that.
Absolutely.
Can help me figure out another
Yeah.
way of opening that box of cereal.
Yeah, and I think that what I didn't touch on as well is that transition kind of, it wasn't just a case of, right, overnight I wake up, right, done with football, bang. There's a process, and going through that process of personal development and self-educating and stuff is also awareness, and is like, you know, being more conscious. I think they say statistically it's like 95% of the day we spend in our unconscious mind,
Yeah.
and only 5% in the conscious, which is crazy.
Oh, it doesn't feel crazy. I think I can...
Yeah, so it's like we're on
admit to some of
autopilot
that.
all day, every day.
Yeah.
And we're very rarely we're conscious. So it's kind of, you know, looking at these, how can we be more conscious? How can we be more aware, self-aware? Rather than just being habitually on this cycle of always reacting how we've always reacted, and you know, so I suppose, yeah, it's a daily thing. It's a daily practice. I'd be lying if I said every single day I'm aware of it and I'm conscious of it, because life's life, things happen, and you've got to, you know, we've got busy schedules. But I think when it comes to like emotional reactions and decision making, I think you know, having more awareness in that area
So
really does help.
you spoke of a few pivotal moments in your story. In the self-development world,
Yeah.
what was the most pivotal moment of a course or a book or something you discovered where you went, oh yeah, this works, this helps?
Good question. I think there was lots of those little moments along the way. It's like seeing like different signs. It's like one instant was, and this was before the personal development, but kind of personal development in a way, because unconsciously I was doing it and didn't realise I was doing it. But I would, whether it's praying or whether it's just talking to yourself, I used to say to myself, you know, all the things that I wanted to achieve, like, you know, I want to be a professional footballer. And I can remember, I'd be sitting down with myself, and I'd be going through it, and I'd be doing to-do lists, I'd be doing my action planning and everything. And on a weekend, and on this particular weekend, I went out with a friend, and I'd be going out, and it was one of them on a Saturday night. What you doing? Oh, nothing, just ready for match of day coming up. Oh, do you want to come out for a bit? Oh yeah, I think I'm missing something. Yeah, let's go out. And it was one of them, and it was like, and I lived like that unconsciously, where it was like so reactive, and on this one particular night, a fight broke out in the club, and me and my friend was just stood talking, and the bouncer cut the music. Bouncer came running over. DJ cut the music. Bouncer came running over, and this guy pushed another guy into a bar, and he turned around and went to throw a bottle at this guy, and I was stood directly in line with him. Long story short, I blacked out, ended up in a taxi to the hospital. The nightclub owner had patched me up, and I had a 4-inch wound in my forehead, and the specialist said to me that if it was 3 inches lower, you'd have been blind for the rest of your life.
Wow.
So for me, it was the guy's fault. It was the nightclub. I'm going to sue them. It was, I'm the victim here.
I get you, yeah.
To the point where it was like, actually, because people will say, oh, wrong place, wrong time, all that. That I was thinking, actually, my words ain't matching my actions. So at home in private, I'm wanting to be a professional footballer. I would do anything to be a professional footballer. I'm saying to myself, I need to outwork other people. I need to be committed, dedicated. But then there's me passively, reactively going out on a Saturday. And there's nothing wrong with that occasionally, but this was like every week where I'd just be so reactive and I didn't have boundaries and I didn't have a direction. So for me, it was like, what I've learned from that is that I'm actually asking for one thing, but then my actions are actually doing different to what I'm asking for. So what I learned in that is
it's
actually
a sharp sign.
Yeah, is actually like, yeah, was I in the right place at the right time to have that experience and to have that understanding? So I started to look at things like that, and you can get obsessed with looking at everything like that, but I kind of looked at that as a defining time where I actually thought, no, if you want to go as far as you can and maximize what you've got. I mean, I was 33, 34 then. So I kind of thought, well, you get one career. You know, there's plenty of time for partying, going out and all of that stuff. Why don't you dedicate yourself and see how far you can go? So it was that moment, and it's not like I needed that moment. You know, at the end of the day, it could have ended up a lot worse. But it was kind of that moment there where I was like, right, if I'm going to say I'm doing something, I'm going to commit to it.
Instead of it hit me like a ton of bricks, you can say it hit me like a bottle in the face now.
Yeah, that's it.
But, mate, is that sort of coming into the laws of attraction type thinking then, where things are for a reason? You're putting out into the universe, you're wanting this thing, and there's signs along the way.
I believe so. I believe that there's signs all the time, and it's, again, being aware. Because
if you're not being congruent to what you're wishing for and wanting and praying for, the universe is going to provide that in front of you and say, by the way, here's this.
Yeah.
And I just don't like when people poo-poo the idea of laws of attraction. It's like, but why not think like that? If it's real, if it's not, I believe it is. But whatever it is, having that attitude and that mindset of being self-reflective, wishing for good things, wanting for good things, it is just the action is the important part of it. You can't just sit there and go, I want to be a footballer, You took the step of, but am I being congruent with what it is to be a footballer? And then you took the actions, I'm imagining.
I don't know what that was, though. You could say you're being guided. You could say, what was that thing? But it was like, off the back of doing that, success. So it was like, again, if I didn't read that sign, if I wasn't kind of having those conversations with myself, and I don't know where it came from. I don't know. I told you I'm a deep person. I don't know where it's come from in terms of having that kind of internal dialogue. I used to do it and I'll come back to what I was going to say, but I used to do it as well. And kind of the line of work that I do now is very much, when I look back, I was thinking the other day, gosh, I was doing this at like 8 years old. Like, I used to go and take a ball and I used to knock it against the wall. And I used to imagine and envision these people in the cars and in the houses, Sir Alex Ferguson, all these like top managers and people in the game, that they was watching me. And so it's not only gone the quick mess about knocking the ball against the wall. I was actually building standards. Like I was like, you know, and I used to do things like if I don't do 100 keepy uppies, left foot, right foot alternate, until I get to 100, I can't go in. So literally, I drop the ball and like just repetition. But I used to play these games in my head and have this internal dialogue. And so I suppose the internal dialogue comes from, it's always been there. And then, you know, envisioning or imagining that there's these managers and things like that is like very much what I do with the visualization, the mental rehearsal work that I do now. But going back to having those kind of conversations with myself, I honestly don't know whether it was meant to be that I kind of achieved what I achieved to then give me a platform to go and support people. I don't know, but I always think outside the box, and I always think there's got to be a bigger reason for this. So like, again, when I lost my mother in 2015, I was like, what is this? There's something bigger than me here. It's not just me and my career. There's something bigger here for me to, and I think if you do tap into that, and if you are aware of it, then I think when you go on about people probably not knowing which direction to go in and what decision to make. I think when you again building those relationships with yourself and kind of having those conversations, I do think that in a way, there is a direction and a purpose from within.
I love the way you talk, mate. This is literally what I've needed. I've had my own struggles of recent, and people see you in a certain light, and they see you smiling and achieving, and things do happen for a reason. And this has been such a beautiful chat today. Honestly, I've been just smiling and nodding and feeling all that. The football thing, I just wanted to pick up on. Was there a moment and a figure in your life that showed you were capable of this? Because when you're I was thinking of young you in the park, thinking Alex Ferguson and everyone's around watching. But I do think you need to have that belief from somewhere that I could play for these teams. I could become this footballer. Yeah. What was the first little seed and moment of I'm going to build on this? I'm really going to water this seed now. Yeah.
I'll probably talk about kind of childhood, really, because that's really where it stemmed from. Yeah. So I grew up in a house where there was me, my mum, my nan, and my sister. My father was absent, so I was the only male in the family. My mother was on welfare. She was suffering from depression from a very young age, and my nan worked 2 jobs to provide meals on the table for me and my sister. And it was kind of everyone's living like this until I go to my mate's 7th birthday party across the road and realise that actually they're living a little bit different to how we're living. It was kind of like being in an environment like that where there's a 2-bed council house, the electricity used to cut off. We used to walk around with the candles to see things. And back then we used to have a television where you used to put a £1 coin in it to keep the meter running on the TV. And then the guy would come at the end of the week and you'd have to give him the box and he'd empty the box and then you'd start again. And it was just like, and we come from humble beginnings. And like I said, my mum instilled some really valuable, or some really good values in me and my sister growing up. And I think I can't say at a very young age that I was aware of it, but I definitely had this burning desire. I just knew that this wasn't the life for me and my family. I knew that there was something more.
And you'd seen the polarity going to a friend's birthday party.
Yeah, and I just felt like there was something, like this isn't it for me and my family. And so instinctively, I don't know what it was. Again, I don't know whether I was called to play football. I don't know what it was, but I just had a ball. And I used to gravitate to a ball. My little one, my youngest, does it now. She just literally started walking within 2 weeks. She's kicking a ball. Wow. So it must just be something instinctive. And I used to knock a ball against the wall. And my mum used to say, when the street lamps come on, that's your cue to come home. And on this one particular night, I was kicking a ball against the wall. And the street lights come on, so I grabbed the ball under my arm and I was walking in, and I'd seen this car, and the closer it got, the slower it became, and he wound the window down. It's a guy in a tracksuit, and my mum always used to say, don't talk to strangers, all that kind of thing. So I was very wary, but I can remember, and it was a rough environment. I mean, look over my left shoulder, there's drug dealers, there's people robbing each other and all that. So you had to be street savvy and you had to look after yourself. And my mum, back then, there was a community, so you could leave your door open and neighbours would come round, it's only me, and borrow some milk and all this stuff. And so I felt safe in the chaos. It was really strange. It was like really chaotic under my roof. It was like my mum was in some rough relationships and stuff, but it was almost like I felt safe, and probably that reflects how, I don't know, weird and complex it was. But this guy basically said to me, can you go and get your guardian for me? And I noticed the badge as well, Mansfield Town badge on it. Obviously I was from Mansfield, so it's my local team, and my uncle at the time was a massive Mansfield Town supporter. So I went in, and my mum and then grabbed the coat and they came out, and I still seen the headlights bouncing off the wall. So I was like, he's still here. Before it drove off. And then, so mum went out and approached this man, and he said, every night when I leave work, either go home or go to training, I always see your son, he's kicking a ball against the wall. I'd like to invite him to organise sport. And at the time I'd play tackle football, my knees would be all turfed up, and I'd just wherever I could and try and go and play with whoever was knocking about. And so organised sport invited me in, and my mum's first reaction was, again, probably lacking limitation mindset from probably my mum's childhood as well. It was lacking limitation. We can't afford it. We haven't got much. Can't get there. We don't drive. All these pushbacks, and I'm thinking, I'm grabbing onto mum's leg, like, let me go. And this mum's like, if you bring your son here this time next week, not only will I take him to and from football, but I'll pay for his subs as well.
Who's this?
So this mum was Mark Hemingway. So
I'm getting emotional.
Which I've recently just found out going into Mansfield Town that he's just suffered a stroke, bless him. But up until that point, he's still working in the footballing community in Mansfield. And so for me, it was like that was the very first time that I had an opportunity. And then, and still at that point, I was like, I don't know whether I was going to be a fireman, a football, anything. So it's kind of like, all I knew, I had this burning desire to go and go on trial and go and play football. And it was just instinctive. And so, from there, I went on trial. I got signed. I had to stop playing with my friends on a Saturday. And then I spent the next 11 years, made my debut at 17. And that was the very first time, when I look back, of someone, probably the first person that believed in me, that seen something in me that I didn't see in myself, really. And I was forever indebted to Mark, and there was another supply teacher, Pauline, as well, two people I always talk about, who was very pivotal, because when I say football saved my life, I had friends that was like rolling joints and doing all kinds of stuff up to no good. And you imagine, I don't know, my father, I've got an identity crisis, I want to fit in, I want to be loved, liked and approved of. That's our chemistry as a human. So I'm there trying to just try and find myself amongst this environment. You become a product of your environment. So football was always that bit of glimmer of hope for me, to think, right. And I don't know what it was, but whenever my friends were smoking, drinking, doing all kinds of stuff growing up as a teenager, I don't know why it was always a no for me. Like, it come to me and it was like no, and I had the willpower to say no. And my parents smoked, my mother was drinking, and it was always a no. And I think it was that glimmer of hope there that was like, actually, there's a way out here. And not only that, I wanted to pull my mum and nan out of those situations as well. And there was no, I always think, if my father had kind of come into my life at that stage, or was in my life at that stage, I probably wouldn't have made as many mistakes. But it's almost made me who I am. By going through those. So it was like, and this is why I kind of moved away from being victim, and actually thought, I'm just so appreciative for my journey, because
I love the life that I've lived.
Exactly. And what I've had to overcome, and what I've had to navigate my way through. I mean, as a child as well, it was like I'd be at school, and now I've got this tag on me that I play for a professional football club. Jealousy,
it opens more doors.
Well, jealousy crept in as well. From others. We played a school team, and
sure,
it'd be Target Nathan, and people trying to take me out, and I had my uniform burnt at one school through racism. And so there was a lot of trying to fit in, I suppose, and just trying to make sense of who I am. And it's very difficult as well when you don't, I had one photo of my father growing up. He used to carry it in my wallet, but I knew nothing about him. And so I suppose, like, having that identity crisis, it kind of, in a way, steered me towards chaos, and kind of just, I'll just associate myself with anybody. So it was, I don't know why I avoided all of that. And the only thing I could put it down to is that I was meant to do it. I was meant to be, be a footballer. And even to this day now, football's found a way of pulling me back in. Even though I had that period where it was like, right, this is my purpose.
Manager now, aren't you?
Football's found a way.
Who for in managing?
Newark and Sherwood United,
2?
Step 5. All one name.
Oh,
yeah, it's a long name.
Oh, mate. That's the reason I wanted to speak at that moment and find that figure in your life or mentor was just because the visualization thing is wonderful and brilliant, and hope is something we need to breed into people. But it's really hard if you've got nothing to base it off of. If you've never had a moment or an opportunity or been given something before, then why visualize? Why look for the potential of other when that's all you've known? But for this guy to have a moment with you and say, here you are, I've seen you every night doing this. I'm going to be altruistic, give what I can.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure when he picked you up and you went there and you had the time of your life, it just opened a seed there.
Absolutely.
Open a moment.
And I think when you talk about those kind of characteristics about helping people and being self, I think I always look back of, where did it start?
Yeah.
You know, so again, it's like carrying this weight, this responsibility, this duty to, you know, if it wasn't for him and Pauline,
that got me so emotional.
It's like, you know, so for me, it's like, it's not even about me anymore.
Yeah.
You know,
look at
I had my career, but it's like, you know, it's one of them where I needed to go. And I always say this to people, connect the dots going back. What is your earliest memory? And I do, so with my business, I do a lot of reframing. And that's the first thing that I'll do is, again, it's painful going back and facing off with things, but we live in a cause-effect world. So if I had a pen and I drop it, it's going to hit the ground. There's laws to this universe.
Yeah.
And so for me, if there's an issue, a barrier, there's a cause, and you have to go back to the cause. Otherwise, you're just spraying weed killer on your problems. You have to, no matter how painful it is, you have to go back and find that root. And same with positivity as well.
Good
you know,
metaphor,
what was that? What was that like? And this isn't just for a negative past experience. This is also for when you're playing in the street and someone, it's like remembering where it all stemmed from, which then can obviously feed into your purpose.
Mate, so. Do you do coaching for people, mental coaching and stuff, and give courses then?
So when I transitioned from football going into doing workshops, I then started to go into schools doing assemblies. And so I went into schools, colleges, universities, sports teams, businesses, and then also the prisons as well.
Wow.
So from there, again, it just kind of evolved word of mouth, doing more work, and then kind of inundated with kind of, you know, going in, doing various things. The hardest thing was really is, can you come and take my lads for PE and put on like football? And I was so driven at that time to actually help people with their mental health.
Yeah.
That I actually that comes secondary, which is really strange given my background. But I kind of put that first and prioritized that as a kind of a more important area to hit. But it evolved from kind of giving talks, and then I did programs, and the prison was something that has probably been the most empowering thing that I've ever done. You know, you're going into an environment where, I don't know if you've been to a prison, but I'll never forget the smell of a prison
and the noise
just the environment itself. It's if you know, I don't know, if you've never done it, obviously for the right reasons.
I've done workshops for them. That was but
if you can have a tour around the prison, But it's just, you know, you've got these guys that are, some of them made a poor choice.
Yeah.
You know, others self-conflicted, or like you say, just all they ever know. So it's just repeated offences, constantly making the wrong decision over and over again. You know, what can you say or what can you do to create change in that individual's life? And I've got a 6-week program here that there's no evidence behind it. It's all my own coping strategies and discoveries along the way, what's helped me and built that resilience. So I've kind of tailored this program as to success leaves clues. So all the clues that's left, what's worked for me and been effective. And I'm like piloting this thing in prison, thinking, well, this is either going to be amazing or it's going to be a massive failure. Like, either way, I was all in. I was like, give it a go. So I did a talk in the prison. Off the back of that, I said, who would like to come on a program? And then we got, I capped it at 10 people because I wanted it to be intimate. I wanted it to be tight knit. Kind of used the philosophy of football, you know, having that tight knit group. And so got 10 grown men on the course. And what I did, the approach that I took was that they had to, I basically give them a piece of work and piece of information to fill in before I started the program. And it was all leading them to give me a picture of what it was like growing up. So it'd be things like, where did you live? How many people did you live with? What was it like? What was your earliest memory, pleasant memory? What was your earliest unpleasant memory? All of that. So on day one, I've done that much, I've got that much of an insight to that individual that I can actually tailor the program around him.
Wow.
And, you know, and we're talking, these people are born into, you know, I had one guy who was a notorious gunman. And how can you separate from being a compassionate person who loves people to then park your kind of emotions and feelings around what they're in for, to then meet the individual and treat him like everybody else? And that was a challenge because obviously you're reading some of these stories and backgrounds, but what that did do for me, what gave me an advantage of probably what other people don't who work in their other services, is that you could see where the behaviors come from, and you can, every single pattern came from childhood, you know, and trauma. So for me, it's like you have to see underneath all the behaviors, and you have to say, right, okay, I'm going to meet you where you are and see the best. I see the best version of you, and I'm going to treat you like I see the best version of you, and then see what we come out with. And you know, this notorious gunman in front of the governor broke down into tears on week 6.
Wow.
And literally laid his soul bare about everything, from somebody who wouldn't open up and wouldn't say anything, to literally getting the root and pulling it out.
Oh,
and
dude.
you know, there's therapy work that I do with them, but it was the most empowering thing.
Wow.
Because then I thought, if you can do that with somebody who is, you know, 40 years old, who's just made so many bad choices, who's not healed, who's not self-reflect anything, to then in 6 weeks make changes. I think if you go into any other line of work or organisation, obviously, the most challenging thing is the prison, really.
There's potential and possibility for everyone if you've got that moment there. Yeah. Dude, we're 2 hours in.
Are we 2 hours?
2 hours in.
Gosh,
I have absolutely loved this. I've thrived in this, and I've learned so much in this. I think we could go again, couldn't we?
Absolutely.
Dude, there's so much in that. Because when you were telling that story, the amount of branches and ideas I wanted to talk about, but we've got kids to teach. We've got kids to inspire.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely buzzing for it. Do you have anything to plug or anything for people?
No, that's just, you know, it's just been great to finally get on the podcast,
mate.
You know, I think, like, you go back to when we, you know, our very first conversation, 2 hours, same as this podcast. I mean, we'd not even spoke prior, and going back to Ian Gilbert, obviously seen something where he knew we'd connect and have that chemistry. So it's just great. Obviously, what you're doing on the farm as well, and the kind of caliber you're getting on the podcast. It's great. So yeah,
I'm enjoying the ride, man. Today's been very necessary and really healing and beautiful, and I just love that you exist. I really do. You're an awesome human. Thank you for your journey, and thank you for everything on that. I genuinely mean that. I'll do my bit. Yeah. Guys, you've been a part of the Old Farm Bus, Back of the Bus Sessions podcast. I'm going to leave you on this. I always do, and I always will. Just be nice to one another, you beautiful set of buggers. That is all you've got to do. Be nice. See you later.